Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to an evening edition of Bio Puzzles. And today is Tuesday, so today the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age published a cryptic from Liam Runnalls, which I'm going to take a look at now. But as has become the tradition on these evening editions, I'm going to start the episode with a poem. This, again, from one of my favourite poets, David Whyte, and indeed one of my favourite poems of his. This is called Sweet Darkness. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. It's time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There, you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your home tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. There's a lovely subtlety with this poem. There's for some reason or another, there's a French translation of this on David Whyte's website, or there used to be at least, and there's an interesting translation towards the end of it. The line, sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness. The translation for this in French is Parfois il faut les ténèbres et la douce intimité de ta solitude. And this la douce intimité de ta solitude is a beautiful string of words. The sound of those words is amazing. And that translates as the sweet confinement of your aloneness. Although those words taken individually, the French words, have alternate and I think probably more natural translations. Douce is being translated as sweet, but also means soft. Intimité is being translated from confinement, but also means intimacy. And solitude is the translation for aloneness, but obviously is also translated as solitude. So you go from David Whyte's sweet confinement of your aloneness to potentially an alternative soft intimacy of your solitude. Has quite a different feel about it. It's curious that translation was made in that way. I think in particular the word intimité. In fact, I should have looked this up. Now that I'm thinking about it, I've always just assumed that intimité really most closely means intimacy rather than confinement, which is quite a different style of word. Obviously, intimacy and confinement really have quite different valence to them. And although the French translation, the words douce intimité, soft or sweet intimacy, which are a natural pairing, more natural indeed than sweet confinement, which is somewhat juxtaposed. That idea of juxtaposition of apparent opposites is quite central to the way that David Whyte writes. So sweet confinement is a very deliberate choice, and indeed anything sweet about one's aloneness, that juxtaposition. And so it's slightly unusual that the French translation is a more natural combination of words that don't have that kind of sense of tension in them. In any case, that is, I'll put a link to that if anyone's interested in reading the poem. I'm just trying to think as well. I think there is something else in this poem where the French is quite sweet, but in any case, let's get on with the crossword, which is what we're here for. make sure everything's up and good to go. You can see where I'm at, and we're going to go slow, I think, tonight. Just try and make this one for the beginners. It's fairly early this evening for me. On Tuesday, we had my pool league match tonight, and normally we play on a single table, so all the matches are played on that one table. Tonight we had 2 tables going, so we powered through it and we got the win, and I played one of my better matches in a long time, so I'm feeling good, and it's early enough to get one of these cryptics out of the way as well. So here we go, 8 across, and we have plain single male beginning to exercise for extra earnings. Well, I feel like the definition here is plain, and I say that because I can't. Well, for one, I can't think of what. Well, actually, I was going to say I can't think of short synonyms for plain. And in which case, and it's not readily abbreviated, so that would more naturally be the definition. And then we've also got a similar challenge at the end with extra earnings. In fact, I think this is going to be overtime. And yeah, okay. So in fact, it is the other way around. So this is overtime. The other reason I thought that plain might be it was that if plain was the definition, I was thinking single for I and male for M. So a word beginning with M, being a kind of negation word, might naturally align with a word like plain. So if it was something like, I don't know, undetailed or something like this. So you can imagine an M word there. But actually overtime is the answer. So we have plain being overt. So there is the short synonym for plain. Single being I, male being M, and the beginning of exercise is E, and extra earnings are overtime. So 1 down. First sale, that may be the first letter of sale, or we've got an O in the clue, so we may just be putting an S directly next to an OR. That's my thinking as I start reading through the clue. Lease often is let. Ocean front might be the front letter of ocean, so we've got an O potentially. In Victorian beach town, okay, so lease is not let but actually rent, and then an O for ocean front, and Victoria beach town is Sorrento. Spent a lot of my youth there. 13 down, 13 across rather. Introduction to nephew, so I see this word introduction and I'm thinking immediately that's a likely indicator word. It's meaning to take the introduction letters or the first letters of a bunch of words following it. So nephew, third and sixth cousins and sister. Third and sixth cousins and sister. Got quite up my explanation of that, and now I'm lost with what's going on. Introduction to nephew would be the N. Third and sixth. Oh, I see, the third and sixth letters of cousins. That's quite an unusual little structure, that, a good one. Third and sixth letters, U and N, and then NUN is sister in the sense of a religious sister. So let's try 2 down. Light meal contains energy. Sorry, light meat contains energy. So my thinking here is that we'd have a word for light as the definition, a word for meat, which is having added to it an E for energy, being the abbreviation. So we need a 5-letter word for meat with an E in it, with an extra E in it, meaning light. And I'm not thinking of anything. That might not be right, but it seems logical. when you've got a very clear indicator word like that, it's pretty likely that that's the wordplay you're working with. Yeah, I can't think of what the meat is around the outside of the E. Sorry, the E would be potentially the energy. So I'm not looking at a meat with an E in it. I'm looking at just a 5-letter word for meat ending in an N. Meat can mean other things apart from the food form. It could be the substance of something, for example. Anyway, I won't dally. I'm not sure what that is, so let's move along. 10 across. So hopefully this will help me, because otherwise I'm stuck. Summarize first cauliflower in harvest. So this is recap, and the first cauliflower gives me the C, and then that's inside of something. So that was my initial thinking, and then I saw the R. So I'm looking for a 4-letter word for harvest, being reap, putting the first letter of cauliflower inside to give us summarize. Also, I've just realized, I'm going to pause for a second. My apologies, I just realized that my microphone was on the same surface as my keyboard, so you might be getting too much additional feedback there. So recap is done, and 2 down. That was this. So light beacon, of course, bacon being the 5-letter meat containing an E. Okay, so 3 down. Unusual sweaty pick, a lawyer suppressed. This is atypical. I'll just take you through my initial thinking there, which was that unusual, I thought maybe an anagram indicator, so we need to spell this unusually. That is 9 letters and not 8, so that's not great. But then I thought perhaps we're going to be removing a letter as well before we do the anagram, because I saw this word suppressed, but then the order of words didn't seem to make sense, and lawyer wouldn't have come into it at all. So then I realized actually suppressed may be being used as a hidden word indicator, which is to say that this expression here has inside of it is suppressing another word, being atypical, which means unusual. So I don't know, I suppose it was the word suppressed that kind of intuited me in that direction. Sometimes you just get a bit of a vague sense that you're looking at a hidden. Also worth noting that the A there, if you were stuck on this clue, it's worth considering that there is an A literally in the clue, and usually words like A or the will be avoided if they can be, if they're not necessary for the clue, or for the structure, the grammatical structure. Occasionally they're there because they just need to be there to make the surface grammar correct. But most often, especially with A, if there's an A in there, there will be an A in the answer directly, or it's representing something in the answer. So let's move along. 15 across. Might be a bit of a long video, this, with a slow solve and a long intro poem. So Shakespeare play with 8 across greeting. Well, we have overtime, so this is Othello. I got that from, obviously, well, a couple of things. Shakespeare play, and I had the O in place and the L, but also before getting to that point, I'd realized that 8 across being overtime could be abbreviated to OT, and then greeting being hello. So not too tricky. Yeah. So, and most often when you see something like this, a Shakespeare play, that's going to be the definition. It may not be. There might be some short plays that you could use as part of wordplay, but that's usually a safe bet to start thinking about things in that respect. Let's try 16 down. Pig bloke with a ponytail at celebration in Scotland. So trying to think of the word here. I think I know what this is, but actually maybe I don't. Well, ponytail, yeah, what's the word? Well, I should be able to put it together. Yeah, hogmony. Hogmony is, I think it is. So the pig is a hog with A. There's an example of that. So we have an A in the clue. That didn't need to be there unless it was part of the wordplay. So indeed it is. We have A directly in the answer. And then, oh, hang on. It's pig bloke, so it must be hogmanay. There we go. So pig for hog, bloke for man, then the A, and then ponytail is the tail letter of pony, and that gets us the final answer. So 20 across. Country fans hating a remix. Well, it looks like an anagram, so we can think about this from the point of view. We've got a word remix, which is about as literally an anagram indicator as you could get. We have 11 letters there, and we also have a G in the answer, and there's a G in that 11 letter set, so all signs are good. So then we're looking for a country after all that, and you may get your way, hang on, you may find your way to Afghanistan. That's correct. 20 down. Calm host ditched introductions pretty much. So ditched introductions. So we're getting rid of the introduction letters of these two words here, calm and host, which leaves us with olm and ost, which put together give us almost for pretty much. So just kind of trying to analyze my basic process there. Not that, you know, solving an LR is rocket science, but for someone who's new to cryptics, it kind of is. So it's worth maybe just trying to think about, yeah, I mean, I think initially the words calm host didn't mean anything to me. They weren't obvious abbreviations or indicators in themselves. Then I see the word ditched, which is an obvious indicator word. Because as we're passing these clues on first reading, you're kind of looking out for clues, words that could be abbreviated, words that could be swapped for short synonyms of themselves, and indicator words that are giving you instructions as to what to do. So ditched is an obvious one of those, and introductions is an obvious suggestion of the first letters. Then I looked back at this and thought, oh yes, so take off those first letters, and away we go. So 25 across. Trembles when royal escapades shark with enormous, when royal escapes shark with enormous head and tail. We've got an S and an A, so it looks like shakes. So sometimes, you know, that's the easier way to just do it. You go like trembles is shakes, and then try to confirm if that's correct. So royal escapes shark. So here's a word that we can abbreviate, which is an R, and that is going to escape. So an obvious kind of instruction word to take the letter R out of shark, which gives us shack. And then enormous head is the head letter of enormous, and in fact the head and the tail, so the E and the S, head and tail of enormous. So 23 across. 5-4 has good intentions, so I'm seeing means well for average balloon. Yes, so straight from potential definition there, has good intentions. That seemed fairly likely to be the definition. Has would otherwise be a bit awkward to do anything with. And then had I not immediately realised that was means well, I might have thought of average being a synonym of the word mean, and balloon a slightly more difficult synonym for the word swell. So 21. warns mysterious comeback. Excuse me, there's a whole bunch of motorcycling going on. I live on Lygon Street, and I'm sure there are some people who are free to break the law at their amusement, and many of them find themselves hooning along Lygon Street at 11 o'clock at night. So, warned mysterious comeback. So this is answer, just an anagram. So anagram warns, mysterious being the anagram indicator, and comeback being synonymous with answer. So left half of the grid mostly done now. 4 down. This is nice. V_W57. This looks like something to do with promise. Yeah, this is so this is an unusual kind of clue. So if you're new to cryptics, then this kind of thing, well, I suppose on the one hand it might seem completely ridiculous or extremely hard to solve. On the other, this is the kind of thing you might actually more likely, you may have seen something like this even if you've not done cryptics, because word kind of puzzle things in the paper that muck around with, there are ones that muck around with little plays like this, so that you may actually be more familiar with this kind of thing. But if we look at the word here, we've got V something W, and I saw the O, I, and E, and something clicked in my brain that promise might be the second word. I think I'd probably already subconsciously recognized that looked a bit like vow. And then if we consider that further, we realize it's an empty vow, which is an empty promise. Yeah, so it's an interesting kind of clue. It bucks a lot of trends, a lot of conventions in a way. Just thinking, because it kind of, it feels like it doesn't have a definition, but of course it literally is an empty promise, that word there. And Liam loves an oddball clue like that, as do most of us. Here's another one, looks like it. Took advantage of, this is nice. I don't think I've seen this play before, but took advantage of this clue. Now, it's worth, obviously, with cryptics, you need to be mindful that anything that looks a bit odd, like suddenly a clue is in capitals, that's not a mistake. That's a reason why crossword editors need to make sure that they are not making mistakes in their printing or correcting what they think is an error in the clue when in fact it's intended. Sometimes they're very subtle little things, like there might be a comma that's or an apostrophe that seems out of place and they remove it, or they could in theory remove it thinking that it was just a typo, but it was critical for some really obscure wordplay. This one here took advantage of this clue, capitalized for a reason, because it is indeed capitalized, which is literally means took advantage of the clue, or took advantage of rather, and this clue is all in capitals. So 2 funny clues in a row. These are pretty non-standard type clues, but they do come up and they're always a lot of fun. Let's try 11. Identical kindergarten with fish glittering. Okay, interesting. Well, I think this is twinkling, and what got me thinking in the right direction there was, funnily enough, the word fish, because a common fish that we see in cryptics is the ling, L-I-N-G, and I thought, well, I have an ing word here, so if this was the definition, the final answer would likely also end in ing, and a fish called ling does end in ing. So I started with the end there, L-I-N-G, and then realized that twinkling would mean glittering, then recognized in retrospect that identical is twin, and kindergarten as a K, I assume is, it might be an abbreviation in a few contexts, but I imagine on maps, Ks might be indicating kindergartens, or maybe it's just a general abbreviation. The thing to note with abbreviations, anyone who's watched Cracking the Cryptic will have heard Simon instruct or give this instruction that abbreviations you can't just take any random word and say I'm going to take its first letter as an abbreviation. So identical does not abbreviate to I. They need to be words that have a legitimate abbreviation, and so kindergarten, there must be a context in which that is abbreviated to a K. That K here makes for an easier solve of 5 down. So let's have a look. Metal implant in electronic Kelpie. The K is helpful here because we can see there is a K in the clue, and initially I was thinking electronic could be E, and then do I need another word for Kelpie? I don't know if there's going to be another word for that, and then realize but there's a K, so maybe if we consider what's implanted in the middle of this, we get this word here, nickel, which of course is our metal. Yes, okay, so let's have a look at 9 across. City to compete with Norwegian sides by 1st of April. So this is Vienna, and the idea here goes that to compete with is to vie. So that's what got me started. Actually, maybe that's not what got me started. I think what got me started was Norwegian sides as the side letters of Norwegian, giving NN, and then the 1st of April giving A. So I thought the end was going to be N and A, and then the rest wrote itself. Again, if you're struggling, if you're new to cryptics and you're looking at a clue like this and you can't make a lot of sense, just look word for word and consider what might be an indication of, or an instruction word, or what we call an indicator. So what if the word side was meant to take the side letters of something? 1st of April, then that might be an A. Something like compete for vie is a little bit more difficult. It comes up quite frequently in cryptics, but you may not naturally think of that if you're not in the cryptic mode. So moving along, 6 down. Biden, USA, corruption is fair. So corruption is a fairly obvious anagram indicator. If we corrupt these letters, we rearrange them and we potentially get a word meaning fair. We have an N, I, and S in the clue already, and the N, I, and S in what's called the anagram fodder. So all signs are pointing towards an anagram. And if you play around with that for a second, you might come up with unbiased, meaning fair. 7 down, drove fast with a vampire. I was going to say dragged, but that's not right. What is this? Oh, fanged. Very nice. So that's quite a difficult synonym, really, for driving fast, to fang, and this kind of somewhat obscure kind of reference to like a vampire. A vampire would be something that is fanged, or a creature that's fanged, and hence the question mark, I guess, because it's not. You wouldn't normally describe a vampire as, well, you wouldn't use the word fanged to mean vampire in normal speech. 12 down. Interior painters tell a renovator the space is astronomic. It's quite a long clue. This feels like interstellar, just from the letters we've got. So, and in fact, yes, so interior here is acting as a hidden word indicator, which is one of these things where we take the expression following it and take a section from the middle, and we get interstellar literally written out there. And hats off to Liam for once again proving to be the world's greatest finder of hidden strings. That's another 4-word string containing a very long hidden word. I feel like Liam comes up with these more often than most. And they're not easy to find either. 17 across. Sire cooked, then expected leftovers. So this is the word cooked here commonly comes up to mean rearranged. It's an anagram indicator. So if we see we've got an R at the beginning of the clue. So if we were to rearrange sire, we might get 4 letters starting with an R. And then we would need a 3-letter word meaning expected that would start with the D here. And if we put those two things together, we'll get a word for leftovers. So the anagram of sire is resi, and expected is due, and that is leftovers. So again, in terms of parsing that, my first thought is, as I'm reading it, well, sire doesn't mean much to me, but cooked does. That's the anagram indicator. What if I rearrange this? Does that make sense? Well, it does, because, well, it may do, because there's already an R in the clue. So I'm going to go on that hypothesis for a second. Then I see that I will need a 3-letter word starting with D, meaning expected, and I realized that was due. Then worked backwards to realize that I could then put resi at the beginning to get my leftovers. And of course, don't forget that once you start thinking about this being wordplay, you can then work on the assumption that the final word, or the final word, couple of words, is the definition. So you can be thinking about that as well. Now, 18 down. And in terms of the selection of what word to go to next, I guess 2 things. One is if you've got a bunch of letters in place, but 2 in particular, if you've got the first letter in place, that's a whole lot easier. So 26 across is not really helped all that much by there being an A in the second place, especially being a consonant, a vowel, which are much less useful. 18 down, we have the first letter, which is much more useful, and it's a consonant, and there's a second consonant, so that's a much easier one to move to. So evil sibling swallowed 5 down. 5 down is nickel. So nickel is a metal, and it's on the periodic table, and it has an abbreviation of Ni, I believe. So that's, when I see that nickel, I go, okay, that's probably going to be the abbreviation for nickel, and it might be right here since we have an N already. So let's say it was. If that is nickel for Ni, it's part of the wordplay. So now I can think about the fact that evil, or evil sibling maybe, but probably evil, is going to be the definition. You can actually probably jump to the final answer from the definition. But you might also think, well, if you can't see that answer, but you assume this is the definition, then what's another word for a sibling that starts with an S? Well, fairly obviously, this could be a sister, and if that's going around the outside of, or if it's swallowing nickel, Ni, then we get sinister for evil. Again, 2 vowels here is not that useful. It's better than nothing, but it's not that useful relative to consonants and first place letters. So I'll start with 19 down. Old captain, to suspend European trade. This is, I got this just from the definition trade, which another word for which is, get myself in the right spot, exchange. And so old is ex, captain can be abbreviated to the letter C. To suspend, oh, I misspelled that. I was going to say suspend does not mean gang. To suspend is to hang, and European also abbreviates to an E, getting us our final answer. Now, C in last place of a 3-letter word, that is going to be pretty telling, I think. Cobra, oddly, twisting around channel. So the word oddly is a classic indicator word to take every odd letter of a word. So if we take the first, third, and fifth letter here, we get CBA, and then we twist it around, we get ABC, which is a channel in many places, or at least a few. So where should we go? Well, it's always a challenge because at this point these will be pretty solvable. If I solve this one now, then 24 becomes a write-in without even solving the clue. So just to make it a bit more of a challenge, I'll have a look at 24 directly now. So small, first thing I think is that is abbreviated to an S on t-shirts, for example. And we have an S at the start of the clue, so that's most likely going to be my part of my wordplay, which will mean that the country at the end is the definition. And with a word that starts with S and ends in A, that is it's quite likely to be a country. A lot of countries have vowels on the end. I'm thinking this is probably Syria, but let's see. S for S, small for S for small. Hairy Cockney returns. There's a few things going on here to the country. So this is Syria. So this has actually been a good crossword in terms of introducing some of the different things that are used, including a few of these unusual things like capitalized and empty promise. And this one here is combining a few techniques. So S for small, and then hairy Cockney returns. So Cockney is a particular clue type where we need to say a word as if we were using a Cockney accent, and one of the hallmarks of a Cockney accent is that they drop the H's off words. So hairy would become airy, and then that returns. So if we return hairy, we get YRIA, we go backwards, and that gives us Syria for the country. What surprises me is that Cockney is more or less the only accent-based clue that you see. You very occasionally will see another one, but it's a bit surprising because there's some really useful potential accent-based clue types you can do depending on other accents, like the Kiwi accent in particular is one that I've thought quite a bit about and done some clues on that basis in the past. So it surprises me a little bit that we don't see more of that. I suppose like the Cockney dropping of an H is a very specific thing, and it doesn't depend on one's particular kind of understanding of vowel sound. It's just a literal take off the H. In any case, that is me waffling. 22 down. Chicken with a flamethrower outside. Help. Well, normally help is assist in a clue like this, but Syria was definitely correct. Chicken is afraid. So let's see how this works. A flamethrower outside. Right, so again, we've got an A in the clue. Why is that there? Because you could just say chicken with flamethrower outside. It would be perfectly grammatical. So the A is there for a reason, and so we put that at the beginning of the clue. Flamethrower outside is the outside letters of flamethrower, F and R. And I'll come back to this clue in a second actually to just talk about a finer point. But F and R give us the next two letters, and then help is aid, and afraid is the chicken. And afraid, if I remember correctly, was one of the answers in the quick version of LR's crossword today. I tweeted today that I did the quick version in the paper, having coffee this morning. I never do the quick at all, and I think it might actually be literally the first LR quick crossword I've ever done, and I found it a lot harder than I find Cryptics. I think that is probably, and from the responses I got from some people, it seems to be fairly common that people find, at least with easier type quicks and Cryptics, that the Cryptic will be easier once you know the lay of the land. So if you're only new to Cryptics and thinking it just seems impossible, stick with it, because soon enough you'll be flying through them quicker than you would the quick. And finally 26 rather, this one that had a bunch of vowels. Well, the vowels have become useful, or this one at least, because I/G is almost always ING, and that's really useful because as I did with a clue before, you can automatically look and see that there's a word ending in ing here, so that's 99% going to be the definition, and then you can focus on the wordplay. So record or record phone, fading. Is this wavering? I'm not sure. I'm just going to put that in for a second. Wavering would be fading, but I don't see record phone or record. No. So record is often EP or LP. I don't think it's either of them in this case. What is this? Fading? Tapering. I think it is going to be. So to record is to tape. Oh, I see. I totally forgotten that I needed to find the ing. I was assuming that the first 5 letters were represented by record phone, forgetting that I needed to get ing in there somewhere. And of course that comes from ring, which is to phone, and record is tape, and tapering is fading. So there we go. That is the LR complete. And let's see how long the video is. Well, 40 minutes. And thank you for joining me for this walkthrough. I hope it was informative and educational. If you are new to Cryptics, then welcome aboard, and hopefully in time with some more practice and more videos like this, and there's many others doing this on YouTube nowadays, cracking the Cryptic at the top of the heap there, although they don't do a huge amount of Cryptic content despite the name. Once a week though, they do a Times UK crossword, much more difficult than something like this today, but yeah, stick at it. It does get easier with time, and if you're an old hat, then thanks for bearing with me through the slower explanation today, and I'll be back probably on Friday, fingers crossed. I do apologize to those regulars on the channel that of late I've been a bit less, I've been publishing less, and also sticking mostly to Liam's crosswords and David Astel's crosswords. So hopefully it's not too monotonous. It's just I haven't had a lot of mental capacity lately, and the LRs and the DAs are the ones that are kind of the easiest to approach. Despite DAs being very difficult, I'm at least familiar with kind of how his brain ticks. But yeah, there we go. So, and of course, if you are still listening after all this time and you're not subscribed, I should have probably made an appeal a bit at the outset, but do subscribe if you'd like to continue seeing these pop up for me and the rest of the world. I think I'm at 72 subscribers now, so edging towards the 100. May you be the 100th. Well, you won't be tonight, but that lucky 100th viewer, I don't know if there's any special prize available. I'm not sure that YouTube is tracking my progress closely enough that that you'll be called out for special consideration on the internet, but I'll notice you, and I'll send you a hello. Anyway, I clearly have lost the plot at this point. I'm just waffling my face off. So thanks again for being with me, and merry puzzling. I'll see you all again soon.